Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're breaking down one of the most significant developments in the Middle East this year. The growing confrontation between Israel and several Arab states, and Qatar's surprising and powerful response at the Gulf Cooperation Council meeting. What began as a regional crisis has quickly evolved into a diplomatic and potentially military turning point that could reshape alliances across the Middle East. The ongoing Israel-Arab war has already shaken political stability throughout the region, but Qatar's latest move has changed the tone of the entire conversation. For weeks, tensions have been rising as Israeli operations expanded beyond Gaza, prompting outrage from Arab capitals. Countries such as Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Egypt have tried to maintain a careful diplomatic balance, calling for restraint while avoiding a full break in relations with Western allies. However, Qatar, traditionally known for its independent and bold foreign policy, has now taken a decisive stand, signaling that the Gulf nations might no longer remain silent spectators. At the Gulf Cooperation Council meeting in Doha, Qatar's foreign minister delivered a fiery speech condemning Israel's unrestrained aggression and accusing the international community of double standards. This statement wasn't just rhetoric. It was followed by a call for an emergency session of Arab defense ministers and a proposal for coordinated economic and political measures against Israel. According to regional reports, Qatar has already started discussions with Turkey and Iran to strengthen its security ties, while also providing increased humanitarian and financial support to affected Palestinian territories. This move represents a significant escalation. For years, the Gulf states have been divided over how to deal with Israel. While some pursued normalization and trade deals, others preferred a cautious distance. Qatar's decision to break this silence and push for a collective Gulf response has forced every Arab leader to take a side. The Saudi delegation, according to insiders, reacted with reserved caution, supporting humanitarian aid but avoiding direct confrontation. Meanwhile, the UAE expressed concern over any step that could destabilize the Gulf's fragile economic security. But behind closed doors, even these nations are feeling growing pressure from their own citizens, as protests and public outrage against Israel's actions spread across the Arab world. Qatar's diplomatic influence has always been greater than its size. Its powerful media networks, particularly Al Jazeera, have shaped narratives across the region, and its vast financial resources have given it leverage that few countries of its scale can match. Now, it appears Qatar is using that influence not only to isolate Israel diplomatically, but also to rally the Arab world around a unified stance. Analysts believe this could be the most serious challenge to Israel's regional outreach efforts since the Abraham Accords. The United States, which has military bases in Qatar and considers it a major non-NATO ally, is watching the situation closely. Washington has urged Doha to exercise restraint and focus on humanitarian mediation rather than confrontation. However, Qatari officials seem determined to send a message that continued Israeli operations cannot go unanswered. Reports from diplomatic sources suggest that Qatar may consider reducing certain energy and investment cooperation projects with countries seen as backing Israel's campaign. The European response has been mixed. Some nations have quietly supported Qatar's humanitarian stance, but remain wary of any steps that could further inflame the conflict or threaten oil supplies from the Gulf. Meanwhile, Russia and China have both expressed support for Qatar's call for a regional ceasefire mechanism, framing it as a move toward multipolar stability. It's clear that Qatar's decision has global implications far beyond the Middle East. Inside Israel, the reaction has been one of growing concern. Israeli officials accuse Qatar of fueling anti-Israel sentiment and undermining mediation efforts. Yet, the reality is that Israel has relied on Qatar in the past for indirect communication with Hamas and for funding humanitarian projects in Gaza. That relationship is now at risk of complete collapse. Israel's defense ministry reportedly held high-level meetings to assess whether Qatari influence could trigger a coordinated Arab economic response, including energy restrictions or investment withdrawals. The broader question is how far Qatar is willing to go. For now, its stance is primarily diplomatic, but observers warn that the tone of recent statements suggests something bigger could be on the horizon. If the Gulf Council agrees on collective action, this could include sanctions, airspace restrictions, or coordinated oil policy measures targeting Israel's allies. That would mark a historic shift in Gulf politics. reminiscent of the oil embargoes of the 1970s, when Arab unity reshaped global geopolitics. At the same time, Qatar is positioning itself as the champion of regional independence. By emphasizing solidarity with Palestine while calling for Arab self-determination, Doha is appealing directly to the Arab street. To the millions of people frustrated by years of failed peace talks and continued violence, this populist tone is gaining traction, not only in Qatar, but across Jordan, Kuwait, and even parts of Saudi Arabia, where public sentiment is turning sharply against normalization. However, the risk of escalation cannot be ignored. Israel's leadership has already warned that any state found supporting what it calls hostile activity will face consequences. Military analysts have pointed out that while Qatar is not likely to engage in direct conflict, its cooperation with other regional powers, such as Turkey and Iran, could shift the balance of deterrence. Turkish drones, Iranian intelligence cooperation, and Qatari funding could create a complex web of influence that challenges Israel's operational freedom in the region. The Gulf Council's next meeting, scheduled within the month, is expected to be decisive. Several member states are under pressure to clarify their stance, whether they will align with Qatar's call for action or continue pursuing cautious diplomacy. Already, rumors suggest that Bahrain and Oman are leaning towards supporting Qatar's initiative, while the UAE remains hesitant. If the Council reaches a consensus, it could lead to an extraordinary joint declaration, something not seen since the 1990s. For ordinary citizens across the Middle East, Qatar's move is being seen as a moment of moral leadership. Social media platforms are filled with support messages, calls for Arab unity, and renewed hope that regional powers will finally take a stand. But there's also growing fear. Fear that another large-scale confrontation could ignite if diplomatic boundaries are crossed. Energy prices have already started to react, with oil markets seeing minor volatility amid speculation about a potential Gulf economic front against Israel. As the crisis continues, one thing is certain: Qatar has placed itself at the center of the storm. Its bold response has reignited Arab solidarity at a time when the region seemed fragmented. Whether this leads to greater unity or deeper division will depend on the coming weeks. But for now, Qatar's message is loud and clear. The era of silence in the face of Israeli aggression, as Doha puts it, is over. The world is watching as the Gulf Council debates its next move. Diplomats are racing behind the scenes, trying to prevent a new front from opening in the already volatile Middle East. Yet, for many across the Arab world, this moment feels different. It feels like a turning point, one where words could turn into action. And as history shows, when the Gulf nations act together, the impact is felt far beyond the desert sands. Stay tuned as we continue to follow every update on this fast-moving story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so you don't miss our upcoming analysis on how this conflict could reshape alliances in the Middle East and beyond.